Speaking through the gray. Speaking through the gray. How did it happen?
What's up, guys? I'm Dan.
And I'm Jasmine.
Welcome back to Speaking Through the Gray, episode number 11. Last episode, we did a podcast on red flags in the church. And this week, we're going on the other end and talking about green flags in the church.
Mm-hmm.
Gotta go from a negative to a positive.
Because why not?
Yeah, for sure. So I was going to say last week we did, but we're still struggling on finding our groove. But yeah, because we're still trying. We're in between a couple different guests that we're trying to get on and just timing and everything. So, you know, we'll find our groove eventually. But yeah, so green flags in the church.
Yep.
Wanna
So
sound like a
green
radio
flags I see as something that's yes, I like this in this church. I think I may stay, or maybe it's a green flag, but yeah. It shocks me every single time I do that. I have no good response to it at all. So as we were researching back and forth, going on Reddit, different websites, what we see as green flags in ministry, our first one is leadership serving others. And I put example as moving chairs and stuff.
And she put and stuff.
And stuff, LOL.
Yeah, no, that's super important. I was just talking with a local pastor last night, actually, for the church that we're going to be switching over to and leading in ministry with my friend Jake Claypool. We was talking about how important it is that, you know, the church, it's not just like the pastor's church, but it's like the community's church, and that they are all working together and serving together and teaching them to serve. And you can't point and direct. And one of the biggest things, because I've done so much in relation to leadership development, reading leadership books, going to conferences and all that. And one of the biggest things is like, you can't expect somebody to do something unless you've done it yourself. Yeah. And, you know, you can't say, hey, I'm not going to do it, but you go do it, you know? So it's like super important if you see that being, that example being projected from the front is that the pastor's willing to do, you know, those things as well.
I think even in a normal job that I have, one of the best places I worked in childcare is when I saw my boss actually doing physical labor. Like if she needs to step in a room and help me and she's actually changing diapers with me and I'm not just doing things by myself and she's just watching me work hard. So even when I'm in church and in ministry, my biggest pet peeve is I'm hanging stuff up for VBS and the leadership is just like, yep, put it there. And they just walk out. Yeah. I like when we like work together.
Yeah, 100%.
If it's all hard work, we should be working hard all together.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, okay. I think we just both had the realization that we're going to breeze through this a little bit. So, if you like short episodes, stick around. Members working.
Yeah.
I'm going off of what you put. What do you mean by that?
I think when you like come into church and we talked about how pastors, they do everything and their first family do everything. I like when I see that the members are also helping the pastors do things like worship, like we have other singers and they're helping out with that, or helping with offering, or helping with, you know, counting the money each week, and cleaning. Like the pastors, I know in small churches, pastors are cleaning and doing the money and doing. So it's nice to see that the members love their church enough to work in it.
To be invested.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and that's such a huge thing, especially in our current church at Wyoming Avenue Christian Church. We see there's just a lot more people that are becoming members, and they're starting to realize, hey, I want to get involved. Like we have somebody who's now shadowing in the sound booth and learning the media stuff, and you know, people that are like, hey, you know, and especially with us leaving, like, hey, we just realized we knew of one, but now we know of two people that play guitar, and there's a lot of people that sing, so getting them plugged in to do worship, and, you know, just trying to figure out, and I think, I'm just making sure it's not something that's already on there, but, you know, members working, but leaders that are plugging people in is huge, because the more, and you know, with really big churches, it's so hard, and that's why small groups are so important. Even in small churches, the small groups are important. But like one of the things that's beneficial about a family style, like smaller church, is understanding, getting to know each person, knowing their gifts, knowing their interests, and how you can figure out how to plug them in. Yeah, and that's
I think one of my biggest things working in women's ministry, we're teaching how to use our gifts and where do we use it. So like, is the leadership helping you learn where your gifts are and where in the church can you use it? So when I see that in the church, that the leadership is helping them as well, finding their spots, and I think that's green flag.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hype.
Our next one is about different events. So big events like children's events or for adults. I know a lot of them have like singles events, which is you meet other people. I've heard. I mean, I haven't done that myself. I heard of it.
So like Christian Mingle, but
it's Christian Mingle in church.
Did you ever try Christian Mingle?
No.
You didn't?
No.
Oh, wow. By the way, if you didn't know this, we met on eHarmony. So just throwing it all out there for the world to know about. But yeah, I went on there. I'll be honest. It was, maybe I shouldn't say this on the podcast, but it was rough.
It wasn't good?
No, it was interesting. We'll put it that way. But yeah, anyway, very much a sidebar. But yeah, so events. Yeah. You know, especially things that are for the community, but not just for the community outside the church, because it's good that we reach out, we let the community know we're there, we try to serve the community and let them, you know, see the love of Christ in action through us as the church, as the body of Christ, but also being intentional about doing things to build up the people that are already in the church, you know, making sure that we're doing things that are building community, like coffee shop nights or you know, worship nights, things that would get everybody together to be around each other in community and outside of the hour that we are on Sunday mornings, because church is so much more than an hour on Sunday.
Definitely. And like around town, a lot of different businesses, they do events to get them involved, and it's not always a good atmosphere. We want to make sure that it's a good atmosphere where you're learning from and learning to people. Yeah.
Is the preaching engaging and relevant for me?
That one's more for you.
That's
for you to
for
answer.
me to talk about. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's a pet peeve because we're looking almost on the side of like green flags and red flags at the same time, because it's like, no, maybe not as much red flags, because it's not like a thing of danger or saying like, oh, you know, just because the sermon wasn't relevant doesn't mean it's heresy. But again, you're supposed to be a good steward of the things that God gives you. And one of those things is, you know, as a preacher, making sure that you're preaching in a way that connects with people and makes them understand. Like, that's why I'm so big, because I think of myself as, you know, somebody who's not super highly educated, but also like, you know, just pretty much an average person. But how does something connect with me? Like, one of the things I think is a golden rule for every sermon that you ever hear: if there's no application, then what was the point?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not bad that you just learned something new. But again, if you're learning something new in a way that makes you think, okay, how am I going to apply this to my life this week? And so in that point, that kind of wraps up the whole relevance aspect, is like, if you're not preaching in a way that connects to people and they say, okay, what's an action step from here? Like, what is something I can do with this information? Then, you know, you're kind of missing out. So when you're testing, you know, especially if you're looking for a new church, going on, checking out their YouTube channel or Facebook live feed or whatever it is, check out their messages and see, you know, are they connecting? Are they, you know, I'm not saying that they have to be a stand-up comedian or have to have the wittiest illustrations or, you know, do crazy stuff with the media. It's like, you know, is it biblically accurate? Like, are they preaching from the Bible? And are they projecting, you know, truth, but also in a way that is driving you to want to do something with it?
That's all.
I think we're good. Yeah.
Okay. I have nothing for that point, but good job.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So next we're going to talk about leadership sharing their vision. And I don't think I really thought about this until I started hanging out with you and dealing with your ministry. I knew that churches had visions and goals, but I never saw the importance of it. So is the leadership, do they have a vision? Do they have a mission statement? Do they have goals? Are you guys just hanging out? What's our point, you know? Anything on that?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of this is actually kicking back to that conversation I had with Jake last night and talking about like what's the goal and focus just for this upcoming year. And it's, just about basically focusing on making sure the church is spiritually healthy and growing personally, and them engaging them to then go have those Jesus conversations with other people. But yeah, making sure people know about that. So one of the things I actually shared with him was something my dad did a long time ago. I think I was in middle school or high school at the time. He did this, like, the State of the Union address when the president comes out and the person announces, President, Joe Biden or whoever the person is, and then everyone stands up and claps, or well, half the room does, let's be real. Yeah. But they stand up and clap, and then the person will walk down the center aisle to get to the platform, and they shake everybody's hands and all that. So the youth pastor, Harry, who was here on the pod, he announced my dad as the pastor of the church or whatever, and then they played like the presidential music, and he went through and started shaking everybody's hands. But he did a State of the Church address, and basically like this is because like in the State of the Union address, it's like this is what we've done, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going. It's kind of the point of it, at least. And so like and that's what I was talking to Jake about. I was like, it was so cool because all these years later, I remember that like it was such a memorable thing to do, and so communicating that vision and how important it is for the people to know, like, hey, you want them to know that they're being invested in, that they are part of that family, but you want them to be so invested that they're invested in the vision of moving forward, what the church is.
How do you think the leader figures that out? Is it something that you observe like throughout the year? Like, oh, we need to work on this. Or, you know what I'm saying?
I mean, yes. I mean, practically, there's definite like paying attention and having basic observations of, your areas of strength and areas of weakness. But I think it's more of a divine thing. Like, depending on, I mean, I grew up like more Baptist and then went to like Pentecostal churches. And so like, I kind of have this like weird, as Jake said the one time, Baptist-costal or something like that, or whatever they call that hybrid. But like, I think it is hearing from the Holy Spirit, like as a pastor and as leaders, like praying, like, what's the direction? What are we supposed to be preaching on? What are the areas we need to allow God to move in this, congregation?
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Nice. Our next thing is friendliness. Do I feel welcomed? And then when I was reading this, I was thinking of the things that I hate because I'm an introvert. Like when they like say turn to your neighbor and tell them that you love them, and I'm like, what? No, I don't. My neighbor's a stranger. Yeah. Or when they're like, oh, here's the new people in church. What's your name? We're all gonna go hug you. I can't. I get it. Thanks for being friendly. I don't like it, but I mean that's good. Be friendly.
Okay, let me test the waters on this. Now, like, if you're going into a church for the first time and you're like the people that are greeting you are like, "Hey, welcome,"
yeah,
and, like,
that's
you're like,
great. I'm not a fan, but that's good that you have like a welcoming committee, like
to so
make
like welcoming
people
as you're
good.
Coming in, but like not making you feel uncomfortable in the middle of the service. Yeah, that's different. More of your hang up here. So
people should be friendly though. Like I would expect people
to talk to a therapist about that. But
I would expect like leadership or members to come and say hi and all this stuff. I get uncomfortable sometimes because I'm just an introvert and I don't like talking to everybody. Yeah, but I think that's a good thing. I don't want it. I don't know. I'm back and forth with it.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, but yeah, I mean, I think on the reverse end of it, if you go into a church and like you're getting dirty looks or you're being snubbed, like, nobody wants to engage with you, like, I think you'd rather be a little uncomfortable with people being overly,
I want them to be
not even overly, happy, but just intentionally friendly than, a church full of
introverts that are scared to talk to each other.
Yeah. The gospel doesn't go far through non-communication.
And that's why the church is filled with different people.
Yeah. Jasmine's gift is...
I'll be in the back playing the piano.
Yeah, Jasmine's
behind
gift
a pole.
is hiding behind the piano. But yeah. No, definitely. If you go to a church and it's red flags full of, not good environment and people that don't seem to
be a
want new
positive
people.
environment.
Because there's churches, so many that have died just in our area in the valley, where it's like, they whittle away to like 3 people and they just kept a large enough bank account to keep the church open for years, which is just unnecessary and honestly borderline sinful in my opinion. But I think it's important that we realize like this is a family, this is a community, and we need to continue to push for it to grow. And you can't do that if you're being weird and mean.
Yeah, you can.
You gotta be friendly.
Oh, help us. So speaking of piano and keyboard, we can talk about the worship portion.
Music.
Does the music draw me into a place of worshiping and connecting with God? Do you think that's in perspective?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is more of a personal green flag than anything. Like, it's important to understand you're not going to have everything that you personally desire in a church, I don't think. I mean, I haven't experienced that personally.
Yeah, like
I mean,
you check every single box. Like.
And I think that's important because church isn't about you.
Yeah.
And I think that's what your perspective should be going in on the core essentials like theology and, the right environment, churches that are active and doing something with their faith and with their resources. But I think, looking at, if you're looking for a church, finding a church that does have, if you're more engaged in contemporary music or, most of the churches we've worked with at least this current church and the next one does have a mix of, hymnals, but also newer music as well. So it kind of tries to please everybody in that way.
Because you got to see what works for you, like what you like.
Yeah. And personally, I mean, I do love hymns. I grew up on them, but like, I think that, I would prefer, all contemporary. And I think one of the things I like doing, and like we just did with Refiner, like how we added in I Surrender All to it, like bringing those in to hook contemporary with like the more old school. Someone's going to get offended by the fact that I said old school for hymns. But, I think that, you got to see what's important for you in engaging in worship, but also trying to find a line where you realize that your ability to engage in worship should be the fact that, like, you're open and you're ready to engage with whatever God puts in front of you.
Yeah.
Because if, like, a church in the middle of Africa that has dirt floors and walls that aren't all the way up and don't have a lot of instruments and they're just singing a cappella can worship God in a more authentic way than you can because somebody didn't have enough instruments on stage, then you might need to check your heart. Yep.
I know. I grew up not really around a lot of hymns, but it was just a different culture.
So it was like heretical, is what you're saying. No, I'm just kidding.
But I grew up like, hands lifted and like face on the floor type thing, like worship. So I've always been into that. So yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Some music. Are there any ways to volunteer and use the talents and areas use my talents and areas of interest? So we did talk about that a little bit. But again, having places to be plugged in. And, I think that's a little bit on the leadership of the church, but it's also like important that if you're engaging and you're going through membership and you've become a member especially, then, it's your job to, connect to as well.
Yeah.
Make sure that people are aware, like the deacons, elders, pastors, whoever the people are, so that way they know and can be engaged with your gifts to know how they can be utilized the best.
Yeah. And I think the leadership needs to make it clear as to like where openings are, where you can work.
Yeah.
It's hard when like someone that can't sing wants to sing. What do you do with that?
I don't know. I'm hoping I don't have to deal with that.
That's a hard. I've had to deal with that before. And you got someone who's very passionate about music or singing, and they're like tone deaf. So that's very.
I mean, there's
that's
creative ways
interesting.
to deal with it, like
Yeah.
making sure your sound man knows which mics to keep lower. And
It's terrible.
you know, one of the funniest things, I'm blanking on his name. One of my friends who's a sound tech at a large church in Harrisburg. Oh, Alan. But he's a sound tech at a large church in Harrisburg, actually right near Alex's church. And he told me he has this one fader like on his soundboard that goes to nothing. And if like an older person comes up and they're like, it's too loud, you need to turn it down, he'll like bring it down and be like, does that sound better? Oh, very good. It goes to nothing. So, but anyway,
That's
just
a hot
exposing
mess.
industry secrets right here.
That's
So,
not- I feel bad for Alan though.
yeah. Oh,
Just
God.
exposed.
Having to deal with that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's a funny guy. Anyway,
What were we even talking about?
volunteering.
Oh, okay.
So, but yeah, I think we got that. Two more here. Oh, you want to?
Yeah, a church which makes the biblical gospel clear. I think we talked a bit about that when it came to like vision.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah. No, and it's important that, just as the Bible, like all of the Old Testament and all the different stories, like if you really study and look into them, they're all pointing towards Jesus.
yeah.
And then everything in the New Testament is either the Gospels where Jesus is teaching and they're writing about Jesus' ministry, or the early church where they're talking about the continued work of Jesus as he's, moving through the early church. So it's just like when we look at that, all the messages need to be
You went to a
focused.
church that you realized wasn't doing that.
Yeah, that's a whole
Didn't you?
situation. Yeah, well,
Go ahead and talk about it. 'Cause-
yeah, I don't know how much to say on that one. I mean, it was just through different friends and a relationship I was in at the time that like I kind of just like put my blinders on a little bit and was like, there were like little red flags, and I was just like, what the heck? Like, basically, like person was like, God loves everyone, so everyone's going to heaven, and it's like, I misheard that. That didn't, you know what I mean? So there was like a couple little like slight comments,
Yeah.
and then eventually like one. I don't want to go too far into it because this is going to expose some people, but yeah, no, there were situations where like it was ugly, like it was weird. Like we did this. I was just talking to Bert about this the other day too. Shout out to Bert Hope. Love you, brother. But anyway, we were talking about how we were doing this like Christmas caroling thing at a nursing home. And one of the older members of the church who just didn't realize it either, apparently he had been there a long time, which is crazy. He was like at this nursing home event and he was sharing the gospel. Like, you need to come to know Jesus. If you don't already know Jesus, it's the best decision, to have eternal life in heaven with Jesus Christ through that relationship and salvation. It was like very clear gospel presentation. And I looked back at two of the younger members who believed in universalism, that like everyone goes to heaven, there's really no point in salvation, and silly stuff. They were like rolling their eyes. And I'm like, oh. And it was right around the time that everything crashed and burned, and I completely severed ties with that church. And it was very.
I think need to know what you believe and what the church believes.
Yeah.
Like a lot of churches have websites. Read through what they believe. Go through a membership class and fully understand.
Well, we've
what
even
they
talked
believe.
about this on the pod. I'm pretty sure in the past, was that like when you and I started talking, because of that thing that just happened, like the first thing I did was grill you on theology. You know what I mean? So like the same thing as far as a church. Like if I wasn't a pastor and we were looking for a new church, like the first thing I would want to know is like, okay, what's your doctrinal statements?
Yeah.
What are your statements of belief? What are any key principles and things to make sure that like it's biblically aligned? Because there's a lot of like, seeker sensitive to the point of fault where it's like, Jesus is kind of pushed out of the picture and he's just kind of a weird watered down version of the gospel. Yeah. So,
Yeah. Our church one is, oh my gosh, I said our church one. Our last one is about a church which stresses evangelism. Good thing it's the last one because talking is out.
yep.
But evangelism.
Evangelism.
What is evangelism?
I don't know. You tell me.
I don't know. You tell me. Don't start.
Yes. Outreach of the gospel, sharing it to, I I believe I always get the reference goofed up. Acts 1:8, essentially like to go into Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth with the good news of the gospel. And essentially that's like your local community, your regional community, like, your neighborhoods around you, states around you, and then to the ends of the earth. So with that principle, I think evangelism is making sure your community outreach, teaching your people in your church how to have gospel conversations with their friends and family and coworkers, to share about Jesus. And, as the Bible talks about, to always have an answer for the hope you have. I'm loosely quoting that passage, but basically teaching people that, like, if someone's like, wow, why are you different? What's, to have an answer for that hope, to share the gospel with people. And then also to be invested in other ministries that are doing things in your area or other areas of your country, and then also missions around the world. So evangelism focused is that kind of in a nutshell, making sure that they're putting their money where their mouth is, where it's like, okay, what are you using your time, money, and resources to make sure that the gospel is really being shared? Because we think of the mission field in other countries around the world, but like a lot of times we don't realize, Jake was actually just sharing with me last night, I believe it's like 40% of the people in your community will never step foot inside of a church.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, that's a large chunk of people.
To reach that 40%.
And the other 60%, it's like, they either go somewhere or they're open to it, but they don't, like there's so many unreached people. And we think of like, growing up in church and church culture and all that. I think that we kind of understand that, like, we look at the world like we've always known about God and the gospel. And even the people around us, even if they weren't churchgoers, like, they still knew a little bit, like John 3:16, a lot of people would still know that. But like, you'd be surprised how many kids don't even know who,
Even growing up for this long, even you just saying that to me, I'm like, do I know fully? Like, if someone were to test me and ask me, why am I a Christian? Mm-hmm. I know, because I've been in church for years. Do I have a good answer to it? Mm-hmm. So that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Because even just as someone that I was born in the church, I can lose that. Yeah. But that's why help me. Evangelism is good, even because even teaching your members, this is what we say, or what you can say as to why you're a Christian when you go out to work, to your secular job, and someone asks you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No,
that's very interesting.
Yeah, I think it's important. Oh man, I had something. I lost it. But I think it's important that we have a foundation which is set upon, and in all the churches, that that the gospel is the foundation. And with the gospel, it's not to be kept to ourselves, it's to be sent out to the world.
And I know, like, a lot of us have a hard time with that, because I've had like a friend on Facebook that was like, I hate when people try to push religion on me or try to talk to you about it or something like that. Mm-hmm. So like, what can you say to those people that are afraid to say it because of the backlash of it? They fear they're going to be canceled and stuff like that. You know?
Yeah. Oh, it's 1 Peter 3:15. Worship Christ as Lord in your hearts. Always be ready to give an answer to anyone who asks about the hope you have, but be gentle and respect him.
Yeah.
Yep. So making sure that we have an answer for the hope that we have inside.
And don't be afraid to be canceled, I guess. Because
well,
there were martyrs in the Bible.
Yeah.
They got killed, so.
Yeah. I'm not really worried about my TikTok account being taken down as much as...
you're not going to get killed, you'll just get a little bit canceled. I don't know.
Depends on which neighborhood you're in, I guess. But I think that, again, we have to, in a world that doesn't take much serious anymore, and especially just basic principles like the nuclear family, the, father being in the home, parents being together. There's so much of our society and things that are important, and studies show all these different things. Our community is important, their family being together, all these things. And at the forefront of all that should be that if Christ is the foundation, those things come together in a proper way.
Yeah.
It's like we have to realize that, yeah, it's uncomfortable, but what's the price if we don't say something about it?
Yeah.
What's the price if we just keep our mouths shut and don't talk about God, don't talk about the hope that we found? And I think it's dire consequences for this world if we don't.
Yeah, and
So.
it's up to that person whether they take it or leave it.
Yep.
So,
And you might just be one of the many seeds along the way to plant, and somebody else might harvest it later, but that's up to God.
yep.
Word.
Yay, that was the last one.
All right.
Whoop-de-doo.
So,
Is there a sound?
right.
Or- no, there's no sound.
yeah. So, and now Jasmine's going to sing a song, everybody.
Christ is my firm foundation.
Oh, goodness. Okay. All right. Anyway. All right, guys. Thank you again so much for joining us again for Speaking Through the Gray, episode number 11. We will be back soon with a guest on the next
Yes.
one. Yes.
Talking about community.
Talking about community.
Tori.
With a female guest.
Our first
Our first
one.
female guest. And it's my sister. So...
Couldn't find anyone else.
Well, we've been struggling for guests, apparently. But anyway.
It's going to be a good one.
It will be great. It will be great. So we love you guys. Have a great week. See you again, hopefully next week on Speaking Through the Gray.
Speaking through the gray.